right, we'll pick up where we left off last week. We went through 2 Kings chapter 18. We read some events. We were going to get into 2 Chronicles chapter 32, and we may still get into a few of those verses today. So, who all read 2 Chronicles? All right. Good job. So we looked at this map and we were laying out all the action plans here of Assyria and how they came and they divided up and went over here and cut off the Egyptian aid that was coming up from the south. And then from Lachish, they were still headed over to Jerusalem. And we looked at all those events laid out in 2 Kings. So why don't we just turn real quick to 2 Chronicles chapter 32. And all this is going to flow right into chapter 36 as we begin this chapter. So in chapter 32, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions here. 2 Chronicles chapter 32 says, after these things and the establishment thereof, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and entered into Judah and encamped against the fenced cities and thought to win them for himself. So, does anyone know what really triggered all of this? What was making Sennacherib so upset that he really put some focus on wanting to come down here into the southern kingdom of Judah? Well, yeah, that plays along with it.
Or is this after Hezekiah gave him some tribute?
No. So
he did because when he told Hezekiah about all the gods, the other nations couldn't stop him, so why did they think their God?
So all that's still after the fact. So if you go back to 2 Kings chapter 18, and there was some events here that really triggered some anger from Sennacherib. So in 2 Kings chapter 18, we're talking about Hezekiah, and we know that because of verse 1. Verse 5 says he trusted in the Lord of Israel. And if you go on down to verses 7, so and the Lord was with him, and he prospered whithersoever he went forth, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and served him not. And he smote the Philistines, even unto Gaza, and the borders thereof, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. So, Penny, it may have been you who said that he stood up and rebelled against the king of Assyria. That connected with the fact that he smote the Philistines. These events were triggering Sennacherib and now wanting to come down and put his focus in Judah. He wanted to take care of this. He wasn't used to somebody trying to conquer some of his territory. So Hezekiah standing up to him. Hezekiah smote the Philistines into Gaza. And now Sennacherib is all over Hezekiah and the towns in Judah. So as we go back, and we're going to have to flip back and forth, but in 2 Chronicles chapter 32 again, it goes on to say, and when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem. Now let's look at the next couple verses, because now we're going to have some military preparation on Hezekiah's part. He sees it coming, so he's going to prepare a little bit here. It says he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together who stopped all the fountains, and took the brook and ran through the midst of the land, saying, why should the kings of Assyria come to find much water? So they're taking some precautions here as now they see Sennacherib headed their way. So they're taking precautions, and then this is where those political, I guess really political negotiations come in. So Hezekiah sees it coming. Somebody mentioned a little bit earlier that he was going to pay some tribute. So this is where those political negotiations kick in. And we read about that back in 2 Kings chapter 18 and verses 13 through 16. And this is where it picks up with Isaiah 36. It says, now in the 14th year of the king of Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. Well, Hezekiah sees us, and he's trying to now think of, okay, well, maybe I can give him some tribute, and he'll back off of Jerusalem. It says, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to king Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended, return from me, that which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver, 30 talents of gold. Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house. At that time did Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord, and from the pillars of Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. So he's trying to pay him some tribute. Maybe Sennacherib will say, okay, you're giving me some tribute money here, we'll back off. And that was the wishful thinking, I guess, of Hezekiah, that he would indeed back off. So, before we go any further, let's catch up to where we're at here in Isaiah chapter 36. All right, Isaiah chapter 36 starts off talking about Sennacherib's invasion of Judah. So it says, now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the defense cities of Judah and took them. Well, if you remember back on that map that we just looked at, you see some pretty major players here. You've got Lachish, you got Libnah. Both of these were mentioned in 2 Kings and in Chronicles as being some pretty major cities that Sennacherib came down and took on and defeated. And when his people were in these cities, this is when he started making some other action plans here. When they were in Libnah, that's where he found out that the Egyptians were coming up from the south, and Eltekeh. They went from Libnah to Eltekeh and they cut them off. They put a stop to the aid. And then he had men in Lachish, and this is where the tribute was sent, and this is where they decided, Sennacherib decided, you know what, no, we're going to continue on over here. Our goal was to take Jerusalem, and that's where we're headed. So, in the 14th year is what the scripture says. So we have a time frame of when all this is taking place. In the 14th year of the king of Hezekiah, he took those cities that we just talked about. And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish, that we just looked at on the map, to Jerusalem unto King Hezekiah with a great army. And he stood by the conduit of the upper pool and the highway of the fuller's field. So, Sennacherib's invasion of Judah, just like we touched on a minute ago, this is being recorded in 2 Chronicles 32. This is also being recorded in 2 Kings chapter 18, and it goes into chapter 19. All of this connects with each other. So, let's let's see here. So, and the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem unto King Hezekiah with a great army. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So, we touched on it last week, but Rabshakeh, we discussed that this is not an actual person's name, but this is actually a position or a representative from the king of Assyria. This is a title that this guy holds. Rabshakeh is a title. So he sent Rabshakeh to Jerusalem as a representative of the Assyrian army to basically do some negotiations. And what we're going to see is, as we go through the next few verses, the negotiation was to basically get Hezekiah to back down and surrender without a fight. That's what Rabshakeh was there to do.
Maybe he could have been a general in the army or something like that.
Let's see here.
Like a man or something.
I had it wrote down. We talked about it last week. Let me go back to 2 Kings.
Got a footnote that says chief of staff or governor.
Okay, all right.
How does it?
Yeah, he's pretty high up. So this is definitely somebody of high rank that's going to go and do these negotiations. Really no different than today with all the different countries. We have the high-ranked people in our military and our government that's going to go do these types of negotiations with other countries. So let's see here. So Rabshakeh is going to do the negotiations, and he stood by the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Now, what I'm about to do is I'm going to pull up some maps of the city of Jerusalem that I think would do us some benefit to know where all this stuff is in the city. And especially when you're talking about Jerusalem, Jerusalem changed in size over the years. And it started off the city of David. Solomon came and increased it when he built the temple. Then Hezekiah increased it. And then in the time of Christ, it increased yet again. So we'll check that out here in a second. But verse 3 says, Then came forth unto him Eliakim, Hilkiah's son, which was over the house, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah, Asaph's son, the recorder. Now what's interesting here is, and I encourage everyone to look into these names that are mentioned, because there's some real interesting backstories that you can get from these names. Earlier on in Isaiah, we have this gentleman by the name of Shebna mentioned. And Shebna actually did not fulfill his responsibilities, and he got in trouble for it. And here in verse 3, we can see that he evidently was demoted because of this incident. And I just think this is an interesting side story for Shebna. So let's see here. In Isaiah chapter 22, we can read this event. Okay, yeah, your eyes are better than mine. So 22, starting in verse 15, it says, Thus saith the Lord God of hosts, Go get thee unto the treasurer, even unto Shebna, which is over the house. So let's keep note of that. Shebna, back in chapter 22, was over the house. And say, What hast thou here? And whom hast thou here? That thou hast hewed thee out of the sepulchre here as he that heweth him out of the sepulchre on high, and that graveth an habitation for himself in a rock. Behold, the Lord will carry thee away with a mighty captivity, and will surely cover thee, and will surely violently turn and toss thee like a ball into a large country. There shalt thou die, and there the chariots of thy glory shall be the shame of thy Lord's house. And I will drive thee from thy station, and from thy state shall he pull thee down. And it shall come to pass in the day that I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with thy robe, and strengthen him with thy girdle, and I will commit thy government into his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, and so he shall open, and none shall shut, and shall shut, and none shall open. So we have these events that we studied back in chapter 22 of what's going to happen to Shebna and who's going to take his place. And here, lo and behold, in Isaiah chapter 36, in verse 3, we read, and it came forth unto Eliakim. So Eliakim's the one that was going to rise up and rank. Eliakim, Hilkiah's son, which was over the house. So Eliakim is now over the house. Back in chapter 22, Shebna was over the house. But Shebna was going to get demoted. And now it says Shebna is now a scribe, Joah, Asaph's son, the recorder. So again, these are just interesting points of connection with the Scriptures when you look at these people's names. Eliakim, it was told, was going to take Shebna's place, and lo and behold, here we have it documented. He did take his place. Shebna was demoted down to a scribe. So let's think about the city of Jerusalem here. And this is interesting, and I like maps. So to get an idea of how the city is laid out, and I think I might use the laser pointer here. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably kind of hard for you guys. But, so this is how the city's laid out. And now I need to turn back to Isaiah 36. Okay, yeah. So in Isaiah 36 and verse 2, it says, And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem unto Hezekiah with a great army, and he stood by the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. So to get an idea of this upper pool, because this is not the first time that we talked about the upper pool, but this is the upper pool right here in the southern part of Jerusalem. We had the upper pool, we had the lower pool. And I was telling you guys a little earlier about how Jerusalem changed over the years. So here we have the city of David. Okay, this is the city of David that we read about in earlier scriptures over there to the right. Well, when Solomon came along and rebuilt the temple, or built the temple, Jerusalem was suddenly expanded up to this section. So now you had all of this that was Jerusalem, and here's the temple. And then when Hezekiah came along, which is who we're studying about now, Jerusalem was suddenly expanded out to this section. So during the days of Hezekiah, this is the Jerusalem that we're talking about, with the upper and lower pools that seems to be a spot where a lot of meetings and negotiations took place. Now later on in history, during the first century, during Christ's time, this outer wall is suddenly where Jerusalem expanded to. So the city became even larger. But it's stuff like this that really piques my interest to see how the city kept getting bigger and bigger as the years go by, and especially to know that Hezekiah, the very king we're studying about, had a part to play in the expansion of this city, which is what all of this is right here. So does anyone remember when this upper pool was mentioned in some earlier studies that we had? So back in Isaiah chapter 7, Isaiah actually had a meeting with Ahaz. It says, "Then said the Lord unto Ahaz, Go forth now and meet Ahaz." Unto Isaiah, "Go forth now, meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool and the highway of the fuller's field." So if anyone has studied Jerusalem and these pools that we're talking about, does anyone know what part these pools play for the city? What do they do for the city? Why did Hezekiah feel that when he took some precautions back in 2 Kings chapter 2, why did he feel that the water played a part of those precautions for the people? Or not, I meant 2 Chronicles, sorry about that. 2 Chronicles 32. And it's good to know this stuff because it gives it even more meaning when we read about this, to know what impact that water really had for the people.
It said in verse 4, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?"
Okay? So we can connect the dots there and know that these pools played a part for the city, in that that was where the water supply was coming from. So it played a significant part here. So Hezekiah viewed these pools as being very important, that they need to do something so that Assyria, just like Clark just read, why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? You know, we don't want them to come and see even more things that's going to pique their interest, to want to stay and to want to take our city. So these are some precautions that Hezekiah made. And all this is connected with the pools here in the southern section of Jerusalem. And when you think about it, when you go back to the map of how the Assyrians were coming at Jerusalem, they were coming at Jerusalem from the south. These pools are at the southern part of the city. These pools are going to be one of the first things they encounter. And they're coming out of Lachish, and they're circling up from the south, and that's where they're going to hit Jerusalem at. So all of these are interesting side notes. Let me get the laser pointer up here. Interesting side notes as we go through this book. Okay. So this is where it gets pretty interesting with Rabshakeh. So Rabshakeh, throughout this chapter, makes two, we can call speeches, two speeches to Jerusalem and to the three men that we just read about, which are now I got to turn there. verse 3, which are Eliakim, Shebna, Joah, and Asaph. So Rabshakeh's coming with a couple of his representatives to talk to the representatives that Hezekiah has, which are the ones mentioned in verse 3. Now he goes on to say, and it says, And Rabshakeh said unto them, Say ye now to Hezekiah, Thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, What confidence is this wherein thou trustest? So here we have Rabshakeh. He has zero respect for Hezekiah. As a matter of fact, if you really look deep into it, he's coming to Hezekiah's man of representation, and he says, say to Hezekiah. He doesn't even recognize Hezekiah as a king. And then he says, Thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria. What confidence is there wherein thou trustest? I say, sayest thou, but they are but vain words. I have counsel and strength for war. And he goes on to say, On whom dost thou trust, that thou rebellest against me? Who in the world are you guys trusting in that you're really going to go up against the king of Assyria, knowing of all of what he's already conquered? Who are you trusting in? So when you think about that, and you think about that statement that's being made there, it's basically, in a way, it would be kind of rude. He's trying to belittle the military that Hezekiah has. He's belittling Hezekiah as even being recognized as a king. In Rabshakeh's mind, Hezekiah is just another person. Who are you guys, and who are you trusting in that you really think you're going to come up against us? So, in verse 6, he gets even deeper here. Let me keep up with the time. Okay. In verse 6, Rabshakeh goes even deeper here, and he keeps picking. And all this is his negotiations, okay? Remember, he's wanting them to just give up without a fight. Just give up. You're no match for us. And this is where he kind of hits them home here. Lo, thou trustest in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all that trust in him. Now let's think about that. So Rabshakeh, he's doing this negotiation, and he throws it up in their face. You guys put your trust in Egypt, in the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. You guys did that. So when he's telling them this, you have to put yourself in the shoes of these men that Hezekiah has standing there. When it's thrown in their face that they put their trust in Egypt, and Egypt came up, and Assyria put a stop to it, what was one of the things that would have hit home with these folks? What did they know they did that God did not want them to do? That's right. That's right. So, pouring salt on the wound. Rabshakeh is saying, you know what, guys, you're weak. You don't really have a king. We have a king. Who are you trusting in? You asked Egypt of all people, knowing you weren't supposed to, and then look what happened. They came up and we put a stop to it. But if thou say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and saith to Judah and to Jerusalem, ye shall worship before this altar. Now let's stop here and think about what Rabshakeh is really doing. He's getting in their heads. You know, he's putting a lot of doubt in these men that Hezekiah sent out to talk to Rabshakeh. So let's look at verse 7. What about verse 7 stands out as a red flag?
It's not, these aren't God's high places.
That's right. These are not God's high places. But Rabshakeh is talking to these men saying, you know, if you're going to tell me you trust in the Lord our God, is it not He whose high places and whose altars that Hezekiah, your king, took away? So he's getting in their heads here. He's being manipulative. He's getting them to have doubt. So talking about this event, does anyone know where we can read about this mentioned in another place? I believe so. Yeah, it should be in 2 Kings chapter 18. If I ever get there. Yeah, and really, so verse 22, but really a lot of this, when you think about it, you know, back in verses 4 and 5 kind of paint the picture as to an issue that the people were having as it is. He removed this is talking about Hezekiah, he removed the high places and brake the images and cut down the groves, break in pieces the brass serpent that Moses had made, for unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. And he trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any of them that was before him. So we know that the people struggled with this type of behavior with these high places and altars. But the thing is, it wasn't God who wanted them to have the high places and the altars to begin with. Hezekiah was taking them away so that the people would stop sinning, and basically idol worship is what was happening. That was one of the things they're guilty of. And let's see here. And then in okay. So this kind of goes hand in hand here with Rabshakeh and the other two gentlemen that are with him, and the conversation that starts in 2 Kings 18:17. Rabshakeh is talking, and he's bringing up a lot of things just like he is here in Isaiah 36. And it goes hand to hand when he gets down to verse 21. He says, now behold, thou trustest upon the staff of the bruised reed, even upon Egypt, on which if a man lean, it will go into his hand, and pierce it. So is Pharaoh king of Egypt unto all that trust on him. But if ye say unto me, we trust in the Lord our God, is not that he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and hath said to Judah and Jerusalem, ye shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? So I'm losing my voice. All right, I got my voice back now. But so this goes hand in hand with what Isaiah 36 is talking about. Isaiah is doing a recap of the history that took place. So Rabshakeh is taunting, he's trying to put doubt, he's trying to manipulate the situation. He's now saying it was the Lord God the whole time who wanted this stuff, and Hezekiah took it away. And it says in verse 8, "Now therefore give pledges, I pray thee, to my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give thee 2,000 horses." So let's think about that. He starts off asking where their trust is. He moves into pointing out the fact they put their faith in Egypt when they knew they weren't supposed to, and he's already put a stop to that aid. Then he moved into trying to get them to go down the path of, hey, Hezekiah took away the high places and the altars, and Rabshakeh is trying to say that those were gods, which we know they weren't. And now in verse 8, he's saying, you know what? Give pledges. Give pledges, and I will give thee 2,000 horses. Now he's saying, I'll give you all these material things. Back in these days, if you read history, the military of Jerusalem, or Hezekiah's military in all, was actually considered weak. So here's Rabshakeh kind of making fun, saying, hey, give pledges, go on and give up. We'll give you 2,000 horses if thou be able on thy part to even set riders upon them. How then wilt thou turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants, and put thy trust on Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? So now Rabshakeh is belittling the military power that they had, in which they probably already knew they weren't the strongest military. You know, this is where they needed to rely on God. Rabshakeh is pointing that out. You guys are weak. You can't even go up against one of our captains. Better yet, you think you're going to hold us off? And am I now come up without the Lord against this land to destroy it? And now look at this. Rabshakeh of all people is saying, the Lord said unto me, go up against this land and destroy it. This is the first speech that Rabshakeh is having with these people. And he ends it by saying, do you not even realize that the Lord you guys believe in, He's the one who spoke to me and said, come up and destroy you. All kinds of doubt Rabshakeh is trying to put in the men's minds. And this is his job. He's the negotiator. Now let's look at this. He's going through all this. He's talking to Eliakim and Shebna. In verse 11 it says, then said Eliakim and Shebna and Joah unto Rabshakeh, speak, I pray thee, unto thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it. Speak not to us in the Jews' language, in the ears of the people that are on the wall. Now let's think about this. They're at the upper pool in the southern part of Jerusalem, and they have a wall going around their city. They have their men on the wall. So the things that Rabshakeh just said to them, Eliakim, Shebna, they're basically saying, look, we understand the Syrian language. The guys up on the wall, they can't understand that language. Why don't you talk to us in the Syrian language and stop talking to us in the Jews' language? They didn't want the men to hear what all was being said. Because that kind of doubt that Rabshakeh just did is going to spread like wildfire. And it's going to lower the morale of their military. They didn't want that. But Rabshakeh said, hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men that sit upon the wall, that they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you? In other words, Rabshakeh is saying, look, the whole purpose of me being here is to basically scare you guys into just giving up. I want everybody to be scared. I'm not going to speak in another language that they can't understand because I want them to know what's coming. I want them to know what I'm telling you, Eliakim and Shebna. So, as you can see here, Eliakim and Shebna are starting to get pretty scared. The speech that Rabshakeh just had, it's bothering them. So now we have Rabshakeh's second speech. It starts in verse 13. It says, Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language, and said, Hear ye the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, Let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you. Again, in verse 14, no respect, no recognition that Hezekiah is a king. He's just keeping his name as what it is. Let not Hezekiah deceive you. He's not going to deliver you. We will conquer you. Verse 15, Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying that the Lord will surely deliver us. This city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. So Rabshakeh's putting doubt in King Hezekiah's ability. He's putting doubt in the Lord's ability, that nobody's going to be able to save the people when Sennacherib's army comes on the scene and takes it over. This is his whole purpose here, is to put doubt in the people. So, in verses 16 through 18, he goes on to say, Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, Make an agreement with me by a present. Come out to me, and eat ye every one of his vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one the waters of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards. So look at the picture that's being painted here. This goes right into the manipulation and the deceitfulness that Rabshakeh is having with these representatives, and also knowing the men are hearing. He's trying to paint a pretty picture here of, look, you guys give up, it's not going to be that bad. So now he's painting a pretty picture of, hey, we're going to take you over, it's not going to be that bad. I will come and take you away to a land like your own, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards. And verse 18, it says, Beware lest Hezekiah persuade you, saying, The Lord will deliver us. Hath any of the gods of the nations delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? He paints a pretty picture. He puts even more doubt in the people's mind of saying all the other nations that we took over, not a one of their gods was able to save them. So don't listen to Hezekiah, who's trying to tell you that your Lord is going to deliver you, because that's the same stuff all these other people said too. And guess what? The king of Assyria came and took over and was victorious. So it's almost like he's now kicking them when they're down. They're doubtful. He's kicking them when they're down. He says, Where are the gods of Hamath and Arphad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? And have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? No. None of these other places gods delivered them. So why do you think that your God is, Jerusalem? Who are they among all gods of these lands that have delivered their land out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? Rabshakeh is going on. The negotiations are continuing. His focus is to get these men to just say, we forfeit, we give up, we don't want to fight you. And verse 30, let's see, chapter 36, 21, it ends by saying, but they held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was saying, answer him not. All of these attempts of persuasion, all of these close calls of doubt, they still took a step back and said, okay, what did the king tell us? He told us not to answer him, so let's not answer him. Then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, that was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder. They came to Hezekiah with their clothes rent and told him the words of Rabshakeh. It stressed them out. It stressed out the men on the walls. But guess what? That's what Rabshakeh was wanting to happen anyway. So, is there any comments on this chapter? I'm going to say, because chapter 36 is going to go right into chapter 37 with these historical accounts. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep flip-flopping back to 2 Kings, back to 2 Chronicles. We're going to connect the dots. We're going to see all the conversations taking place between Rabshakeh and Eliakim and his men. And we're going to see ultimately at the end of this who's successful and who's not. So, we'll call it quits on chapter 36. Hopefully the chapter made a little more sense as I went through it. And if you guys think of something else you want to bring up next time, please do so. That'll be it.